Good morning and welcome to the November 14th meeting of the Citizen Oversight Board. We will be joined today by the new Executive Director of Safety, Al Gardner. For those who have been following along, Al used to be on the Citizen Oversight Board, at least when Karen and I were here. Maybe other members were on when he was on the board, and chaired the board for a short time. And I actually took that role from him when he moved on to the Civil Service Commission. So a little bit of history. It'll be interesting to be on this side of the fence from each other, and should be a good dialogue today. A few announcements. We continue to have a board vacancy on both sides of the mayor and city council appointment process. Beginning in the new year, Karen, who has already resigned, will actually begin her retirement from the board, I understand. Although Karen, I'm happy to continue to loop you back into the meetings. So we will end up, also having one less member in our meetings. Her vacancy is the vacancy that council is looking to appoint, but we will soon not have her shining face on our calls. Let's see, the OIM's semi-annual report is about to be published. Having glanced through that recently, there's some really useful information to the public, including reflections on EBD and some investigations that, at least in the COB's opinion and in the OIM's opinion, have been insufficiently conducted on the part of the safety departments. Let's see, during our last board meeting, Sheriff Diggins gave the opportunity for board members to visit the jail unannounced, and several board members were interested in taking him up on that. We followed up and he's provided some details on how that would work. The idea there is that we get tours all the time, and it's awfully clean and well-maintained in the areas that we visit. But we also hear from community members who are in those facilities that the conditions are different. And so the idea is our ability to sort of get real-time information without any glossy, shiny presentation. It's actually a privilege that I think Congress has as well for federal facilities. And so I think that can be really useful. Let's
Julia,
see. Yep.
on that point, are you going to send us the list of details on how we proceed, or what is going to happen?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then we'll plan our sneak attack.
Yeah, unannounced.
Yeah, exactly. With like 6 of us showing up. So anyway, I think that'll be a really good, it's something we've discussed with the sheriff as long as I've been on the board. So it's exciting to sort of have this as an option for us. Let's see, moving into some board business before we transition to our discussion with EDOS Gardner, and welcome, sir. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the October 24th meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Let's see. Okay, we've got a good number of attendees today, and as we do in every meeting, we will allow and encourage public comment. That said, we need to make sure that folks keep their comments under 3 minutes, just like they do in City Council, so that we can ensure everyone who wants to raise their voice may. A couple of other things for us to move into quickly. Let's see. We had an open request for budgetary support from the COB to the OIM. Monitor Castle, I see that you're on. The board had some discussions this week, and we have decided not to approve that request, and I'm happy to sort of debrief you on the discussion there. Let's see, we've got, Daniel, can you highlight the Thanksgiving and Christmas meetings? We're not going to have a meeting on Christmas.
Yeah, just in terms of scheduling, we currently meet on the second and fourth Fridays of each month. This year, in this month, the fourth Friday is the day after Thanksgiving. I don't think anyone is interested in meeting on that day. And the fourth Friday in December is December 26th, which is the day after Christmas. I don't think the board is interested in meeting on that day either. And so just to clarify whether we are planning on, my assumption is the board is planning on canceling those two meetings for this year. And then instead of the alternative being rescheduling, we could move it to the third week, the week before Christmas or something like that if you wanted to. But just wanted to create a space for those two meetings this year. And then there is, I am putting together the calendar for next year, 2026, and whether the board, by default, I continue the scheduling practices that we have currently. And so second and fourth Fridays will be what is scheduled for next year. We can change that if need be, but if you want to change it now, we can change it now too.
Mm-hmm. I personally am not interested in either meeting the day after Christmas or the day after Thanksgiving, as much as I love you all and love this topic. But if anyone feels strongly, go ahead, Rufina.
Yeah, I would like for us to consider maybe not changing the entire schedule, but perhaps contemplating one of the meetings each quarter to be in an evening or late afternoon time frame. And I know that impacts individuals that work, but it also is in the interest of gaining more public participation and visibility. I'd like for us to consider that. We, in the Community Engagement Committee, are looking at having some public forums, but those would be different from a meeting. We would be discussing topics, timely topics, etc., in those forums, or perhaps there might be interest in combining a forum with a meeting. I don't know, but I want to throw that out as a suggestion.
Great. I think that feels like an opportunity to engage different folks who have different schedules. Seems great to me. Other thoughts from the board?
I wholeheartedly agree. I think we should do that if we can.
I agree as well.
Okay. Looks like Alfredo's left his screen, so assuming we can check in with him later. Let's see, Daniel, if you could connect with David. I know he has an ongoing conflict with at least some of our meetings. And so if the first and third Fridays might work better for him, let's see if that can be accommodated. Otherwise, if we're planning a year out, my schedule can accommodate anything. And I don't know what folks think about second, fourth versus first and third Fridays.
Alfredo, I was talking about making one of our meetings in each quarter an evening or an late afternoon meeting to allow for more participation on the part of the public. And so would you have any thoughts about that?
With sufficient foresight, I'd be open to that and think it's a good idea.
Great. Okay.
Larry, do you have any thoughts?
I too think it'd be a good idea to at least once a quarter.
Great.
So would a 4 o'clock or a 5 o'clock work better for folks?
5 would be better for me just because it's after school pickups and stuff like that.
Agree.
All
And
right.
if we're trying to get the after work crowd,
Yeah, agreed.
I would say 5 is a more typical.
Now, obviously, a 5 o'clock on a Friday is a very bad idea.
No thanks.
Yes, terrible.
So we would be looking to move perhaps one of the meetings from a Friday to maybe a Thursday.
Yeah, or some other day of the week. Yeah.
I think
Or even a
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Yeah, I think earlier in the
Wednesday?
week is better for.
Okay, Wednesday, okay.
I think it also
Uh,
open up more opportunities because a lot of people can't attend this on a Friday, but they could attend this midweek. So I think that'd be great.
Okay, so maybe a Wednesday. So we'll look at the schedule and see. There's less likelihood also of holidays happening on a Wednesday. So,
Right.
except for Veterans Day. So that might, throw us off. Who knows? But okay, so when we contemplate the schedule, Daniel, will at the Community Engagement Committee, how about if we give you a proposed timing and dates?
That
So,
works great.
okay, thanks.
Okay, what else? Let's see. A quick follow-up on education-based discipline and EDOS Gardner. We will certainly ask you some questions on that. Members of our board and members of the community had a meeting with the chief this week, and what we learned in that meeting was the chief is done doing community engagement and feels that the engagement thus far has been sufficient. We understand that a final version of the policy will be provided. I know we've gotten it through community members into our email. I guess I'm surprised at the informality of that channel, given the gravity of the policy, and would have preferred perhaps a more direct communication from the chief on that. But neither here nor there. So we understand that this is sort of coming to some sort of conclusion or next step, and EDOS Gardner will certainly ask you about that, as I said. Let's see, other things that are sort of hot topics right now. We talked about it a little bit in our meeting in October, but the city's continued engagement with the company Flock to do what was originally proposed as an attempt to reduce auto theft using license plate readers. The city has also signed a $0 agreement with Flock for autonomous AI-enabled drones. More to come on that conversation as well. As I understand it, the city is updating its contract with Flock on the first item as well, because that contract has ended, and sort of how that proceeds, I think, remains to be seen. Let's see. The board also met with the PPA, which is one of the police unions this week, and I welcome other board members to share their thoughts on the meeting. I thought it was a very productive meeting, and I think the board, surprisingly, the board and the union have the same perspective in terms of the length and fairness of the discipline process, perhaps coming from different sides. And we do feel like there are opportunities to collaborate to, I don't want to say improve EBD, but to have new thinking on how the disciplinary process can be made more efficient in some areas. And I think the general discussion about opportunities for process improvement more broadly was a productive one. Alfredo or Karen, anything you want to highlight?
Just one point that was made, and that was the representatives at their table feeling like their suggestion for another analyst being added to the DBD's team of discipline decision making, I guess. They feel like that is not being listened to.
Yep. I think
I would agree with that.
yeah,
We would agree with that.
yeah, more broadly, I think general agreement that, the monitor's office has been waiting for a vacancy to be filled, and, for a period of time had more than one vacancy that was needing to be filled. And, more people can help more in terms of reviews and things like that on the monitor side. And that is also true on the police department's internal affairs as well. Alfredo, reflections from you?
I also thought it was a very generative conversation to see how much common ground there is in wanting the same outcomes on a disciplinary system that's fair, that is streamlined. And my biggest takeaway would be that we haven't had a genuine discussion in good faith to improve the current system before this whole conversation took off around creating EBD, and from our perspective, essentially creating an off-ramp to the possibility of having accountability and community trust rising together, and that we missed that opportunity with EBD. So being able to take a couple steps back to come to the table to identify those bottlenecks, those challenges, those inefficiencies, and find ways to build capacity both within the OIM and within DPD to make their jobs more effective. And I hope that we're able to take advantage of that opportunity to not legitimize EBT, but to really think through what we could do to make the disciplinary process as it exists and as it was informed by a lot of community stakeholders, and not just do away with that.
Mhm. Yeah. I think what we found is that none of us feel like we're being listened to. So I think we found good company in our ability to sort of express our concerns and have those be acknowledged in a fulsome way. Let's see. Last, the board engaged in media training this week, and if any board members want to highlight how that went, that's great.
Yeah, I was very pleased that we were able to get that accomplished this year. That was part of our strategic plan, was to facilitate more of our board members being trained in interviews, et cetera, in the event that we're asked by press to comment or whatever. Obviously, we still hold with the norm that our chair is the spokesperson for the board, but on occasion that sometimes changes. You're not everywhere all at once.
Sometimes I'm unavailable. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So allowing us to have that facility is really important. So I would recommend to those that, and I really am sorry that more weren't able to attend, but hopefully we'll have another opportunity in the future and can get that done. The tip sheets she was going to send, Daniel, have they been sent?
I believe we'll get them today or probably Monday, if not today.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
shortly.
and I think everyone should receive them, even if you didn't go to the training, just because of the fact that it has really good suggestions just in general. And so would recommend all of the board to review them and use them.
That's great.
So
it may be helpful too if there were presentation materials, if we could just incorporate that into some of the onboarding for future members as well, and create
good
an
idea.
article where they,
Yeah, excellent idea.
even without the live training, people can do some learning on their own. All right. Well, we have held EDOS Gardner at bay, and so let's move into that topic. Sir, thank you for joining us today. It's nice to see you again. As a note on process, we have provided a few questions in advance, but since this is your first meeting with us in this capacity, if there are things that you want to begin our conversation by addressing, I will open the floor to you, and let's roll.
All right. Yeah. Good morning. Thank you, Julia. Don't have anything necessarily outside of what's on the sheet to open up with. I will be referring back and forth to these notes as we go. Still getting my arms around quite a bit here, as you can imagine. I had about 3 weeks to prepare for an $850 million budget to be able to present that. So it's a lot. So there are a couple of items on here to make sure that we stay on track with it, but I'm ready to go when you are.
Okay, great. Well, our first question just asks you to share sort of your initial priorities when you take the helm.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'll say, first of all, the way I've defined this and the way I've talked about this with council, the way I've talked about it with the mayor and at the community event that I've also had in every opportunity I have, as well as with the police department in terms of many of the sergeants and especially the command staff, is to rethink the way that we think about public safety, because we have a tendency when we say public safety to automatically focus in on police. But if truly we want to make public safety something more broad in terms of holistic, in terms of how it affects us as Denver citizens in our daily lives, we have to look at it as a public health piece. We have to look at it much larger than that. And so I've taken some of the best parts from some other models that exist around the United States, and some that I've had conversations with in the past with previous directors of safety about how we take a look at actually the safety ecosystem is what we call it. And this is dealing with having prevention at the top of that system. When we get into the conversations around budget allocation, especially as we look at allocation in police departments, one thing that I know for years that we've looked at, and that I've joined various commissions to be a part of having greater insight into, that is we don't always put prevention very high on the list. And so when we talk ecosystem, we talk about, first of all, disrupting how folks are entering into that system. That's number one. So at the top of that ecosystem is prevention. I will tell you, here at the city of Denver, one of the departments in the Department of Safety, or the community, is the neighborhood safety piece. We have police, fire, sheriff, 911, and then you have the community safety piece, or the community interruption pieces that are led by us, which are post-trial, those folks trying to re-enter the community and things of that nature. So some of that is really elevating the work that they do to make people aware of it, to make the citizens aware of it. A lot of this, I don't think many times that we're aware that those systems are even out there as tools to be able to help folks re-enter the system. And I think elevating prevention is a big part of that. And I think as we elevate it, now we're able to really start talking about allocation efforts from a budget perspective as we collect data and show that we're impacting recidivism on that level. And that's in partnership with other folks that are also doing the work, because the city cannot do all of it. But I think in the city, I think that part's huge. The next piece of that, we talk about enforcement. And enforcement is the obvious, is stating the obvious. And in that point, I'm talking about the police department largely. And we're talking about, from enforcement level, but doing that from a human level and maintaining the dignity that should still be involved in enforcement. We've tried multiple things in the past. We've talked about culture or changing culture. Those are big words, and that's like turning a cruise ship. It's not a speedboat. And I think a lot of times we have to look at all of the pieces that play into changing that culture. And yes, discipline is a piece of that. At the same time, I think, and we say training is absolutely a piece of that as well. At the same time, I think measurement is also a huge piece of that in terms of measuring officer performance in potentially some new ways. There are some new methods that are out there in terms of, trying to be preemptive and trying to address and identify certain things during the training cycle when these officers are at the academy. And I think that's important. So you have the detention piece, which Sheriff Diggins has talked about a lot, and I think we're all fully aware of of his motto in terms of leading with humanity and keeping the person first. And we start talking about even discipline to deputies. We're talking about the folks who are in our custody, making sure that they're safe, making sure that they're well cared for. That's extremely important. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to really put a pin in that, to take a look at how we can also de-silo some of the ways in which workflow is used throughout the sheriff department, as well as identifying some of the structure that will make workflow a little bit easier for the deputies, and try to cut down on the 24-hour mandatory overtime that we have. That is a big issue. As right now, there's certain things that I would love to talk about in terms of ideas for that, but as you know, we're going through collective bargaining. And some of that I can't mention right now, and hopefully I'll be able to mention in the future. But I think there are a lot of things that do that. When you start talking about deputy fatigue, you talk about their ability to manage all of these multiple tasks while making sure that they're filling out their paperwork, and it creates a situation that's unsafe and unhelpful for everyone. So a major focus is in figuring out how to reallocate and take a look at the workflows and the composition of a lot of the workflows. Last, I'll say is stability, and that's the part that I started with, almost with prevention is at the top, and then stability is kind of at the end of that, in terms of how we care for those folks who are entering back into our communities. Taking a really hard and data-driven look at those community partners that are helping us do the work. Obviously, the city is working with constrained budgets this year, and we're taking it quarter by quarter, and hopefully we rebound in that area, but we also have to think in real terms. What if that's not the case in 26? What if that's not the case in 20? How do we make a system that doesn't disparately impact those folks who need our services most, even if we don't have the budget to do it? And that's the way that I think. I've always thought that way in terms of, yes, we would love to have more money. Obviously, that's the solution for everything. For a lot of what we do is to have funding. But the truth of the matter is sometimes that's not the case. And you have to think outside the box and say, then what do we leverage in order to get this work done? And I think opening ourselves up to take a look at that is another one. So the safety ecosystem is going to be the approach when we talk about what is important to me. If you look at 1 through 4, if I were to order that, it's prevention, it's enforcement, it's detention, and it's stability. I think the other thing is building in more touch points to the community. The Department of Safety, we will not have a community outreach position. We lost that position during the some of the budget savings, and we will not get that position back. That being said, there's no shortage of events and community forums and all of these things that still need to happen. I would love to make all of them, but more than likely, I'm going to tell you now that will not be the case, just because I'm one person, and no, I cannot make all of them. And if that's the case, then how do we do that better? And how are we able to leverage other members of the Department of Safety from all of the departments to be able to focus on and ensure that we're reaching out to various members of the community? I think another part in there too is dealing with Department of Safety wellness. I won't just say officer wellness, because I'm also thinking about the wellness of our fire personnel. Fire personnel deal with some of the highest rates of cancer in the industry. They have a very high rate of PTSD as well, because a lot of times they're responding to health incidents that are pretty difficult, car wrecks and things of that nature, which we don't think about when we think about safety. But they are extremely important. At the same time, 911 operators also have a very high rate of depression and other things from being the first person on the call, hearing all of what's going on, processing it and passing it on. They teach them coping methods to that, but they're human, and you can't unhear some of the stuff that you hear. And in dealing with 911 operations, when we talk about how to improve call and answer time and things of that nature, we have to look at 911 operator wellness. We've seen an increase in FMLA leave for 911 operators. We can't just say, if we had more money, X would happen there. Again, we have to look at support that we're giving them. We have to look at the culture that they're in. We have to look at maybe some intangible ways that are impacting why that FMLA is at a rise. And as a result, that impacts all of us who live here in this city. So the wellness to Department of Safety is very important.
But before you continue, I just want to go back a little bit to you're sort of winding this theme of tight budgets into your discussion, but the departments have taken probably the smallest amount of budget cuts of any departments, and for the most part, as far as I'm recalling, the majority of the cuts were from vacant positions, and none of the departments are ever fully staffed. So eliminating vacant positions is basically like a accounting trick in the end. And so I sort of take exception to there's not a lot of money, because there's pretty much the same amount of money that there was before, with the exception of positions that have not been filled that now cannot be filled. The police department got, I don't know, 168 new recruit positions. So we eliminated vacant positions, but we also created a lot of positions. Firefighters, I think there were 25 there, 60 new sheriff's deputies. So I just am trying to square the circle on what are we actually talking about here in terms of budget reductions? The city of voters just passed a huge bond measure for, $75 million training facility for the police department. So I guess I'm sort of what are we talking about when we're talking about tight budgets in the department? I know, recently the council amendments, they were looking at, kind of reallocating some of the public safety money. The police department spend, $2 to $3 million a year in recruiting, but asked for $10 million this year, and I think received it. And so can you help me understand sort of what you mean when you're talking about the lean budget times?
Yeah, I'm going to speak specifically to DOS, and what I will say is this: I'll start with why officers are still being hired and why we still have academies. The amount of attrition when we hire those officers in, the number of officers that are on the drop and that are leaving the department, we hire we have the new academies. It's enough to try and cure what we're losing through officer attrition. That's a big piece of it, which is why we're not still, through all these academies, not up to full strength. And on first glance, it would look as if we're having academies. So therefore, why is it taking so long to get full strength? If we cut academies, we would probably be grossly understaffed from a patrol officer perspective of where we should be in this city. So that's just enough to offset the number of retirements and resignations that we have to keep us near full strength, because we're still not at 1684. That's that. On the other side of that, in terms of budget cuts, yes, we did have a number of positions that we had to hold vacant this year. And some of those positions are very important back office positions as well. So we started to talk about accounting positions that we need to the Department of Safety oversees or does the financials for fire and police. and 911. So there's a lot of budget activity that's done behind this. All of the contracts, all of the grants, things of that nature. We held back quite a few of those positions. So those positions are open, and we're short-staffed in terms of being able to handle all of the different budgetary items there. That has a very real impact. For the most part, a lot of those were non-sworn positions. Yes, you're right, that were held. And being on this side of it, I absolutely see how it impacts the department's ability to support these agencies.
Thanks. Let's move on if we can. As you know, we'd like to talk about education-based discipline and sort of what your role in that is, and what your current thinking, and discussions have been on education-based discipline.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've had quite a few discussions about about education-based discipline. Yeah, I've talked to a number of stakeholders who have reached out to me to have that discussion. And it's a discussion that I welcome. I think that education-based development, I think that education development is not I don't see it as a bad thing. I actually think it can be a useful tool. In some of the discussions that I've had with our monitor in chief, my positions kind of remain the same, in that I think it needs to be more narrowly defined in scope. Like I've mentioned before, I don't necessarily lean on the fact that the data has been proven out in other places, and I think with Denver using it, I think there's an opportunity to place ourselves in a position where we prove out the EBD as it fits in the Denver community. So I don't look at it as this is a great idea because these folks used it, as much as it is this could be a tool for us to use. And I think we have an opportunity to define that. I do think, I can't go backwards, but I can say going forward, I do think that I intend to work with some folks on making sure that, first of all, A through F is much too broad of a discipline spectrum. I think even, A through C is much too broad of a discipline spectrum. I think there's so many things in each category that you can actually spend a lot of time in each category trying to define which ones to actually place an emphasis on and be able to measure. I think it's important that we place measurements on them, and I think we can take a look back and say in 6 months or a year and determine how well it's worked or how well it has not worked. And I think at those points, we take a look at how we can either draw down on it, de-escalate it, not use it at all. But I think there's an opportunity to take a look at how discipline is being almost now. There are various choke points in the discipline side of this. There are various choke points, and there's not a panacea to that. I think we have to do that and right now I'm taking a look at multiple different systems that we have and trying to figure out what is it that's causing these choke points. Because it takes time for these things to happen, for these choke points to proliferate. And I think in part of deconstructing these different choke points, much like you would do in any businesses, you would start taking a look at those business processes, how they're being worked on, time frame, these things, KPIs, all these factors to figure it out. I see this as one component to that. Yes, ultimately, it is my signature that will cause EBD to happen, but that is my approach. I do support the use of it, but I support it in a very narrow function. And I think I still intend to work with folks to see how we make sure that is going to be applied in a way that it doesn't harm the community.
Is what you're suggesting perhaps a pilot to understand its impact?
I don't know if I would use the word pilot, but I imagine, we could say pilot if I definitely have a time frame in mind, like 12 months, I think should be able enough to bear out some information for us or some data. I also think that the wording in terms of us using it, I think we need to have very clear data points that are able to tell us whether or not we're not hearing from community and they're being affected. Not hearing from community doesn't necessarily mean that they're not being harmed or we're not being harmed. So we can't use that as the only indicator. I just think we need to be thoughtful around being able to measure it.
Rufina, I'll turn it over to you in just a second, but I just want to make sure you are already aware that we can use training as an outcome of discipline now, correct?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. Rufina, go ahead.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, so one of the issues that has been plaguing this rollout, Director Gardner, is the fact that in the past we have really had a robust community input into major changes such as this. And this is a major change. Taking it away, taking any category away from the current discipline process starts to affect that oversight that our Office of Independent Monitor would have. And because there wasn't that robust community input, although the chief claims that there was, it has no semblance to what has happened in the past. And that's what the community expects, and rightly so, because of the harm that any kind of lack of accountability has. It impacts safety. And the perception of officers not being held accountable, appropriately being held accountable, affects that trust. So there's been major, I would say, a degrading of that trust because the process did not go well. And now to have it be, for lack of a better way to describe it, sort of jammed down our throats is really going to be problematic for us, meaning the community. So I am really hoping that you, having sat in our chairs before, understand that now if this process is going to go through any change, that it be as it's going to be having to be scrutinized very strictly, and not have just, well, it seems to be working, so we're going to continue it and blah, blah, blah. Evaluation is going to be critical, and that has to be a neutral evaluator. And I don't believe that the chief should be the only one deciding who the evaluator is. If you're going to be looking at data, that evaluation has to be very upfront and not related to any place currently, meaning the chief and the DPD. And so community input should be allowed for that as well. Yeah. And when you're saying narrow scope, we have to feel certain as to who's making that decision as to what goes to EBD and what doesn't. And so that's where the trust comes in again. So there's just numerous places where, unfortunately, Chief Thomas has not fulfilled some really important expectations in terms of what he's, unfortunately, because of the rollout, has created for this. And so you know how it is. Once trust is degraded, it is hard to build back.
Well,
so my question to you, having said all this, is where are we going to have that community robust conversation? He's already told the community he's not going to have a group, a task force like we had in the past. And that's unfortunate, because I think many of us would be very open to hearing where are the problems, let's fix the problems. EBD doesn't have a precedent anywhere.
Yeah.
And we're going to be the guinea pigs. So we really need to have you now raise up that important factor of rebuilding some trust that has, for the last 11 months, been sort of just flying in our face.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rufina. You know, I'll say it like this, and you definitely, I understand what you're saying, and you're definitely not wrong about, I think there could have been a lot done differently in terms of the socialization of the idea from its ideation point, right? And I think there were some real opportunities there to do. I think people did the best that they felt they could in this. But at the same time, I do understand that I think I know where people are with this in terms of feeling, where did this come from? It just popped up, and now here we are, and we are being told that we have to accept it. And as somebody who, yes, has sat on the other side of this, and at the same time, quite frankly, have grown up a victim of a lot of this. Yeah, I'm no stranger to a gun being put on the side of my head in Third Ward, Houston, Texas, when I was 15 years old. This is not, so I don't approach this from a standpoint of we'll be fine and this is nothing. I understand the impact and I understand the trauma that it imposes on community. I had a discussion last night with a good friend of mine who was reliving a situation a year ago where he had his daughter in the back seat and the police officer came to his window, was banging on his window, broke his window because he wouldn't pull over because he was in a dark space and he needed to pull over under a light post. So his 3-year-old was in the back seat. He's a military veteran, had PTSD, and actually it brought him to tears telling my circle of friends that, and he relived that. And that's something that's very real to him. So I'll just start with saying it's not something I take lightly. It's not a game. It's not I don't operate, and I'm very seldom pushed into things. I'm gonna do what I feel is right. And I'm doing it through the lens of my lived experience. And that is that we can't do these things lightly. Now, I cannot go back, unfortunately, because I wasn't here in this seat when it started. Would I'd like to think maybe I would have done it and it could maybe potentially different, but I know those who did it thought they were doing the best thing, and I won't try to judge them based on that. But what I can tell you is this, and you're right, when trust is lost, it's very difficult to get back unless, I will say, all of us choose to reset that and say, okay, how can we get this done the best way possible? And I agree with you, Julia. Yes, there are things right now in the discipline matrix that already have training as a component. This is one thing that I said the other day when I was having more discussion with one of the hearing officers, actually, who were giving us her insight as to what needs to be different about this. And what I said was, this has to be done in the same spirit of the discipline matrix and not separate from it. I think it's that and is what I keep saying, because if we say, well, we'll have this one model and this is the model that we will use, and yes, it is almost us pioneering or guinea pigging or hopping out there first to be a trailblazer on this. Yes, that is in a large sense, that is exactly kind of what we are willing to put forward. But I think if it's done right, if it's done with trust, to your point, Rufina, if it's done from a perspective that we want to try something new, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with trying something new, unless it obviously hurts people and causes disparate harm. But I think it's a start, and I'm fully committed to still listening, to still trying to shape this for Denver. But I wanted to be very clear about where I am mentally with this. And that I do think I see it as a tool in our toolbox that's worth a try.
To Director Gardner, we are not yet too far gone that we can't say, okay, it didn't start out too well in terms of the community input. We can still have that. We can still go to that point of having more conversation. There is no rush in this issue. There's no
Yes.
urgency that the community doesn't feel any urgency on our part to change the matrix. We recognize that there are issues, and we want to talk with the chief about those issues and work with him.
Right.
Right now, it feels like we're done with that. That's what he said to a group. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to implement by January. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, then, you suffer the consequences then of this being jammed down our throats. And the
Yeah.
consequences that those things don't come back, that trust is eroded, and we will not trust our leadership now with what is being said. But I don't think it's too far gone yet. I
Agree.
think we can
There's
still
nothing
bring
that's
it
like
back.
path dependent here, right? Like we've had this shitty process and it's eroded public trust. And so why on earth would you move forward with this idea anyway? Like, the process has been a sham, basically. Like no one has been heard. The process, the actual EBD process when it was initially rolled out was half-baked and underdeveloped. And then, we've gone back and forth with the community in this churn. We've done public comment in the most bass-backwards way I've ever seen in my life. We're publishing new drafts to that is not at all how public comment works. This has been an absolute mess. And so to say like, well, we'll sort of like fix it from here, it just is like, why bother? Why not actually start with the question of what problem we're trying to solve and then actually build trust in that? I think everyone can agree the process is too long and too complicated, but like why we would continue from here when we've already built this like when we've already eroded trust completely. Alfredo, I want to let you ask your questions.
Well, thank you, Julia. And from there, it just kind of reiterates several points that have just been brought up. With that, Director Gardner, I want to welcome you. I definitely appreciate the position that you find yourself in now. And going back to some of the initial coverage, that coming into this role lacking direct public safety was touted as both potentially a negative thing and a positive thing. And I'll leave others to decide that for themselves. But I think this here is that first test for your leadership in where you stand and how you lead this. And also want to echo what my fellow member Rufina and Julia have said about this, that it's not too late to take a step back. For the last year on the COB, we have been trying to play catch up on a process that was poorly managed, on policies that changed on the fly. Currently, between us and the police union, we don't have the same draft in front of us of how this is going to be rolled out, what it's intended to solve. So I think really, with all due respect, coming into this in the EBD, this is that real first test of your leadership, of whether you'll really stand with the community and supporting a process that is grounded in community perspectives, that really carries forth the hard-fought wins in accountability and discipline, or whether you'll just step in and go along with what has been really clearly made has been a very poor process and putting us on the national forefront to guinea pig a process that will impact a lot of people's lives.
Thank you.
Other board member, go ahead, Karen.
First of all, good morning, Director, and
Morning.
congratulations on this appointment. My question goes to a problem that isn't talked about readily when we talk about EBD, but seems to be part of what has been the impetus for proposing it, and that is the issue of retention and recruitment among both the sheriff department and the police department. I understand we're talking about the police department right now, but that problem exists in both areas. My question is, what would be your first steps in addressing that issue and what has been a problem for law enforcement here in Denver?
Great question. Thank you, Karen. I will say that I'll start with what we're looking at in the sheriff's department, because when we talk about, well, we talk about retention. One of the catalysts or one of the data points that are used in some of the discussions around pay rates and things of that nature, we start talking about why deputies and police officers are leaving. And a lot of times we start to have a discussion around salaries and things of that nature. The first thing I did was ask both, as the sheriff department and the police department let's take a look at the exit interviews, because I want to find out where on the reasons for those officers leaving, how far ranked is pay ranked at all? And if so, where is that ranked, to get a better idea of how that looks, because often we can throw that factor out there and really that may not be the only factor, and we may be chasing something that's really not there when it may be culture, it may be opportunities for advancement, it may be a lot of other things that we're not even considering. So the first thing is really trying to wrap my arms around why we're seeing those high numbers. Why is that turnover happening? Is that because of the folks who may need more training, who are leading them on a daily basis? So trying to wrap my arms around that from an exit perspective. The second piece of that is taking a look at, I've been looking at promotion schedules and rates and how that looks in the department and how the training looks to prepare people for that. A lot of times when you start looking at testing in these environments, you take a look at the test preparation. You take a look at the number of diverse candidates in those testing pools, as typically the higher you go in these departments, sometimes the less diversity you have. So how can we improve that? Well, we have to look at kind of the foundational pieces of that. So that's the second piece that I've been driving, or really those are the two things at this point, Karen, that I've been focused on, trying to determine how much of this is actually budget related, and some of it may be something that we can focus completely different on. And then the second is taking a look at the pathways that these individuals have in order they feel to better themselves. At this point, still early, but at this point, those two are what I'm starting with.
Larry asked a follow-up question. Do exit interviews always happen, or is it an option? If they do not, will you require that it's always an option? Or
Yeah,
that
I think
it's conducted.
Yeah, from an HR perspective, we cannot make someone do an exit interview. So it is voluntary. So you're probably not going to capture, and that's in every company. You're not going to capture 100%. But surprisingly, when people especially feel disaffected by particular things, they feel very passionate about that, and usually will share it. So I think it'll yield us a nice amount of information.
Other questions for the director on EBD? Go ahead, Rufina.
Yeah, I still wanted to address the evaluation piece. Again, that's another trust point, because if we get evaluation that people do not believe is credible, then it doesn't matter which way that goes. It will serve as another jam point for us. And so I really want to, and this has been difficult to get answers from, well, it hasn't been difficult. He's told us that he's going to have an evaluator that he's going to choose. But we don't know the credentials of this individual. We don't know the background. And we also right now don't even know the scope. So again, this is putting the horse before the, or cart before the horse, in that evaluation piece is looking less and less credible as we continue. Again, because the community input isn't being allowed. So I'm going to really press you to help us, help the community have that opportunity to address these very important factors, because it will only mean problems in the future if we don't address them now.
Yeah, I agree. I will say this. Thank you for that, Rafina. My silence is not to avoid what you're saying. It's more to listen to what you're saying. And I never feel pressure to provide answers all the time. And that's one thing you will find out about me. So and my silence is not so that I'm dismissing what you're saying. I want to be very clear about that. This is my first time in this forum listening to you. I've heard it in many different spaces. And I think it's important for me to honor what you're saying, to make sure I'm keeping notes on what you're saying. I will tell you this, I will commit to this. I will tell you that this body, whether it's a member of COB or a member of Independent Market, someone will be involved on this side. We're not going to move forward without having a voice from this section. That's for sure. That I can tell you. How many people? Who will it be? I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know. But I can tell you that it won't move forward without that. That I can tell you. But please don't mistake my silence for dismissal.
I appreciate that, and I really appreciate that you're listening to us, because we're only trying as hard as we can to impress upon both you and the chief that this is folly to continue in this path and not bring the community with you. That's all that I want.
Thank you.
Okay, plenty more to discuss. If we can move to Flock, let's talk about that. There's been a great deal of community interest, rightly so, in the deployment of Flock in the city. There's a task force that stood up. There's been new policy signs since that task force was established. I mean, the whole, like, we're doing really bad process right now, and it's sort of confusing how, I guess it's not confusing, because there's now 2 data points that suggest we don't actually care about community process or input. We'll just do what we want to do anyway. Can you help us understand how the city is thinking about these tools and is working to safeguard, prevention, and prevent abuse? So a few things I'll mention, right? It is against the law for Colorado law enforcement agencies to coordinate with federal law enforcement agencies as part of our implementation of Flock. The department clicked a button that enabled us to subscribe to the national network, which is breaking the law. The procurement of Flock was supposed to go through council because it was it was originally over $500,000. And then the mayor revised it, despite the fact that the city procurement laws say, even if you're near 500,000, you need to go through council. Lastly, there are not appropriate safeguards in terms of like the searches, right? In some of the searches, we've been able to find words like abortion. So looking for women coming from Texas to Colorado to have abortions. This tool is being used to prey upon different constituents in the city, and the number of auto thefts that this tool has solved is like 6 compared to the 2 million images that are captured monthly of Denver residents. It has not had a meaningful impact on the crimes it was intended to solve, and instead it is creating a lot of negative externalities. So can you just help us understand sort of what your point of view is on Flock? And Tamisha, I see you have a question. I'll get to you after.
And just real quick, Julia, to jump in, it was reported that in that contract that was signed, that the last 3 lines of the contract state that Flock still reserves the right to share whatever information they deem necessary with whoever they want without having to inform the city that that has happened.
Go ahead,
Did
Director
you want to
Gardner.
get to
Yep.
Tamisha or me? Okay.
Tamisha, is your question regarding Flock, or do you want to wait for the answer and then ask your
Big
follow-up?
Flock. So it's more of a statement, I guess. So we were supposed to have canceled the contract, and it was just going to go to the end of August, and without consultation, they entered into additional contract to expend fees that allowed them use of drones. So their drone policy that's in place for the DPD does not encompass how they're using it. So that brings into privacy concerns, potential lawsuits against the city for violations of civil rights, data protection, and then Flock has already just announced that they have expanded their network to incorporate Ring devices that are hooked up to people's homes, to their doorbell ringers. So that now further expands their ability to violate privacy. And we have no mechanism in play. We don't know how long they're retaining the data. If we actually own the data, what they're doing with it after the expiration. There's a lot of concerns that it's clear due diligence was not performed, especially from a cybersecurity perspective when it comes to the citizens of Denver.
By
So
all
there's
those concerns, we
yeah,
have
so-
re-signed another contract, which
Yes,
again, is like,
exactly.
why are we so path dependent? Why don't we stop and say, is this the right thing for the city at any point? Go ahead,
Right.
Director Gardner.
So, and there are a plethora of lawsuits going against Flock that are being filed against them on a daily basis regarding these issues from.
Uh-oh, I lost you, Tamisha.
Maybe
It's me.
we lost your sound, Tamisha. No, we can't hear you.
Oh.
Where they're
we will-
going from a technical perspective.
Your sound.
Oh, you're back. You're
You're
back.
back?
Oh, back. Okay.
Yeah.
There's plenty of things that first needed to be put in place first, right? So perusing your background, I do know that you have a background in technology, so you do understand where I'm coming from when I said there's a lot of security issues that are coming into play that should have been talked about and planned before even entering into any contracts.
Is that it or you?
I'll pause right now because I mean I can go on for like I can give you a whole
We
dissertation on
have
this.
concerns. We have concerns.
I
Yeah.
have concerns. So I'll pause to give you a chance to kind of take that in and formulate your response.
Okay. No, thank you for that. You know, I too, this is a new technology. It's a vastly new technology in terms of how it's being used, not just in Denver, but this is not, the discussion is not germane to us, but it's in so many different other places, right? But for the sake of this discussion today, it's how it impacts those of us who live in the city and county of Denver, right? And I'll say that those concerns I completely understand because I also looked up at the signs on the post, and before I really found out deeply about what they were, wondered what they were, right? So that's a real thing. I think any technology that's really kind of new, we're still trying to get our arms around how to use AI. If we look at the news yesterday, Verizon eliminating 15,000 jobs as a result of some of those jobs being replaced with those functions that you no longer need humans for, trying to figure out where those technologies fit into governance and how we use it on a regular basis. I'll say 30 years ago, when I got into technology, it was very hands-on. And when we configured firewalls, we had to put those rules in firewalls every time someone was to access something. Now, those commands are written on the fly, and I'm getting to Flock, but I'm gonna go through a little way of how we get there, and then what I feel we need to do from a Department of Safety standpoint to try and safeguard and to try to work ourselves backwards, right? So now AI or machine learning, actually ML, it's called in the industry, will actually write those rules on the fly. It will actually detect a particular amount of traffic coming through a firewall or a router or whatever, and it'll automatically do it. Now, that's something that 10 years ago we were talking about, that we started working with, but everyone was kind of very curious as to how that works. That got us to what I'm sure Julie would be familiar with. It's called a zero trust environment. And that zero trust environment is built off the prospect of nobody needs access until they need access, right? And you build these different access points based on exactly what they need access to. And that's been widely adopted in both municipalities, state entities, government entities, you name it. And so that's the mindset that we should always work from as a city, from a zero trust mindset. After that, there's a proliferation of what was called GDPR, and that governed how we took care of data and how data was disposed of. And it became very important when we found out data is coming from all of these different methods and means. Your phone knows probably more about you than probably anything else in terms of your habits, what you search, and the otherwise. And it's been a long road to try and create these different guardrails around how we use that data. That being said, Department of Safety's position in this, or what we are tasked to do, or what I'm tasked to do, and the way I'm looking at this, is that the technology is here. How best do I make sure that the policies that we have are protecting you and I? I will say this, my position is that this is much larger than just a tool that safety needs to look at. This is a citywide discussion. This is a discussion with technology services. This is a discussion that I'm having with Suma, who's our CIO, who we worked for some time together on a number of different things. But this is a discussion that we're having about how do we define our policy around data use? Because here's the thing. Technology is going to continue to move forward. It's going to continue to proliferate. And I think how we approach this right now, they're good. If I had a crystal ball and had a magic wand and I could go back a year, we do many things from a different perspective. Sometimes I don't. So I'm working with what I have, and I think what I can do in terms of that is to make sure that we're approaching it from the right perspective so that we're not here again. And if we don't get it right from a policy perspective in the city, because one thing that I would tell you, technology contracts are very, very different than a lot of contracts that go through in a lot of different areas. And you have to be very keen on how to understand those things. And that's one thing that the city has to agree upon. We have to get our arms around. I'm working with TS on this because my point to the mayor is this is a larger issue. So I'm controlling what I can control, and that's data retention, access policies, data protection policies, zero trust policies, and building in those safeguards to make sure that we are handling data the way that we should. But that's how I'm approaching where we are right now.
I'll just build on what you're saying in that our CIO, our Chief Information Officer for the city, was just renamed the Chief AI an information officer. And so I think that sets a very high expectation that the city is a sophisticated actor when it comes to regulating and managing AI. What I will also say is I literally work in AI, and I was at a conference last week as part of a coalition of cities who are engaged in conversations on AI. I didn't happen to see anyone from Denver there, which I thought was interesting. What I can say is that that coalition has already built a set of frameworks that cities can use to buy AI in an ethical, human-centered way. And so the city doesn't need to, reinvent this. Seattle already has a number of policies established and published, right? Like, not a lot of new news under the sun with regard to like data protection and privacy. And so the fact that we, have appointed this AI leader and, we're bundling this very dangerous, national surveillance technology, to me is like, what in the world? Like, that is just such irony for us. The contract with Flock has lapsed. And so we're negotiating while their cameras are live in the city, and we have literally no recourse against them in this period of time. These are the kinds of things where it's like, if you actually had a point of view, you would stop the use of the technology while you don't have appropriate safeguards for your constituents. But this is a nightmare, I think, for Denver. The next thing I'll say is that this is one of many surveillance technologies that the police department can use. And, at this point, the department does not have the level of sophistication in order to tie all these things together. But the city already has Halo cameras. It already has a different license plate reader technology, right? Body cams. We have tons and tons of constituent data that the department carries in silos. And eventually, because of the promise of AI, that will all get tied together, right? And so Flock, for me, is an important first test, but it is absolutely not the last line for us in terms of protecting resident identities and safeguarding that we are not spying on our residents.
No, and maybe
Thanks.
this is, if you don't mind, Julie, maybe this is a good opportunity to really talk about the safety roadmap that I also am working with some members of the academic community here in the city to create. I'm specifically going outside of the Department of Safety to create that. Part of that is to create a roadmap that shows that interaction between these types of technologies, to guide investment, but also to guide use. And then another third leg of that stool is to inform public, because there are a lot of moving pieces. And often the thought is, how are we using each one of those moving pieces? And typically the safety departments around the United States have safety roadmaps. We've never had one in the city. So the community has no idea whether in 2 or 3 years what's on the mind of safety and what are we focused on, and really have an opportunity to have that discussion well beyond before we get there. So part of to address what you're saying is something else that I'm working on. I think that roadmap is really important to have in place to boot conversation ahead of the stream before it gets downstream, and then to give you a better idea of how these technologies interact.
That's great. I think, the last thing to comment on Flock is we have had probably 4 conversations with the chief over the past 2 years regarding drones and drones as a first responder, which is a common model for the use of drones. And I personally believe is an interesting and useful use case. We have never once had a conversation with the chief that involved a third party running AI-enabled autonomous drones. And so, we signed this $0 agreement with a company that no one should trust for a technology we have never discussed in a use case that is very different than what we had conversations about. And so, it's great for us to get a roadmap, right? But we better get our shit together fast, because, we're deploying what feels like the absolute worst case technologies, without a lot of safeguards in place right now. And to me, having the conversation with the police department about drones is like, we're going to build into this thing. And then all of a sudden we built into the absolute wildest sci-fi use case for the thing is insane. And it's so concerning. We have no practice. We have very little procedure on this. And then all of a sudden we're giving this power to a third party and they're giving it to an algorithm to make determinations. And so, you know, like how we got here, it makes me scratch my head. And it also feels like, you know, we're really winging it on the technology side. And so if that roadmap can be developed, you know, by the end of the year, so that we cannot, you know, next we're going to get the RoboCops and the, you know, it's like, what are we doing? Like, how is this the first thing that we're deploying using advanced technologies? We're not thinking about like helping people find housing. We're not helping people like get access to medical care. We're not, you know, looking at economic development opportunities. We're just like doing RoboCop for our communities. Like, this is a very strange application to me. Tanisha, it looked like you were gonna say something.
Well, I mean, this is just like my area, so I have a lot of feelings about this, but I do believe that there's definitely benefits in the technology. It's just it's the lack of research and planning before we're putting things into place, and it's evident, and it's evident in a lot of areas, right? For instance, we have EBD. We're solving a problem that's not a problem, right? And then but we're ignoring the real problem. And here we're trying to do something, but the policies haven't caught up with what we've thrown out there. So we've released it, but the policies are lacking, sufficiently lacking. That's going to cause a lot of litigation issues later on. So, and I think that we're not putting just bare rights first in how we're defining these guardrails. I mean, and that's the problem. That's really the problem. Until that becomes forefront, we're going to continue to be in a place like this where we're behind the 8 ball, trying to catch up, but we're deploying stuff that we don't have a breadth of knowledge of. So that's the issue.
No, agreed. Thank you. I will say this, in terms of technology rollout and the use thereof, I don't anticipate us having another situation where we're rolling it out, or things have been rolled out the way that they have. I think I foresee a much more robust method around requirements gathering and really other things, all of those rudiments that I'm sure you're familiar with, that I'm keenly familiar with, which proceed these sorts of things. And I'll just say that. And I'll say thank you for saying that. I want to go back to drones. I will say right now, I just want to make clear that we're not using drones for passive surveillance. I will say though that we are training drone. Somebody's going in their house. Hopefully it's their house. And
I think that's Karen. Yeah, she's
their phone. That we are using drones we're using Skydio drones as first responder for pilots to test the concept of DPR, but right now Flock isn't being used in that passive way yet at all yet. So I want to make clear on that.
The problem is that Flock is doing passive surveillance in general in the city, right? That's what we've seen with Flock. And so like, it's fine for you to say that, but that's actually not true on their like main product side. And so it's very hard to sort of square the circle on that, right?
I just want to it's not part of that yet.
Yeah. Okay, so we could go on with this for a long time. We have concerns. Let's see. We have a couple of questions. There are something that maybe we pin for future discussion is there are a number of police departments in the city that need delegated authority from the Director of Safety's office. So RTD is one. We're sort of starting to hear rumblings of what I think are called not court marshals, but marshals in the courts.
Right.
And there seems to be an evergreen conversation about RTD, but increasing concerns about the folks who are in the courtrooms. And so if we can maybe put some follow-up questions together for you and learn a little bit more, I'd like to do that. I know I want to get to public comment and make sure folks who have been here for the long haul with us, get their chance to ask you questions. The last question that we have is, so a jury verdict came out recently regarding the police shooting in Lodo. For folks who don't remember that, officers basically opened fire against a suspect, but that was against the backdrop of a bar letting out in Lodo, and a number of people were shot by officers in that. One officer resigned and was criminally charged as a result of that, but other officers also fired in that case. And so the board has sort of lost track on where the discipline is on that, but as far as we know, no discipline has been applied to the other officers in that case. And, we'd love your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'll cover the question around delegation of authority. I'll cover RTD first really quickly. I've met with the police chief and some of the folks over at RTD, and as they wanted to read me into what their desire was and what their previous discussions were with Armando, which I was privy to before stepping into this role just through my own research. So here's one point that we left off on, and to keep the discussion abbreviated, and that is the fact that it is very clear, and I made very clear to them, we will not move forward without any type of oversight structure that exists, especially as we're talking about them being able to enforce Denver municipal codes. So that is a very robust discussion that has to happen. I'm under no pressure to run through this quickly, so that's where we left it. From an audit to that, what I've ordered is that I receive an internal audit of existing delegations. That it wasn't one place that I could go to pull this up, and I think a lot of the language alignment is off. I think we need to update terms, and so it hasn't been looked at in a long time. So I was glad that this question has actually come forward, and I started asking this question when it came to RTD. So I'd be happy to revisit it, but that's what I have going on right now, is a full audit of all of those orders that were coming from this office for a long time, because I can't answer that today in succinctly. Lastly, I'll say the discipline review process is complete in that the officer Ramos resigned in February of 24 as required, and the office issued the disciplinary officer and disciplinary order in 2025 with decision that the officer would have been terminated. The shoot board was completed also as part of the discipline review process, and the recent, I'm sure you're aware of the civil verdict that has taken place. But the city was not a defendant to the recent civil lawsuit, but just the defendant himself, and that's where we are with the discipline in terms of that Lodo shooting.
So said plainly, the officers who fired against people who were just out having a nice time with their friends received no disciplinary action from the city?
There was no disciplinary action for those two after the review. They didn't find any circumstances for that.
Thank you. I'm sure you can understand that is quite confusing to the community.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Were they at least given additional training?
That's too on the nose, Rufina.
Well, I will respond exactly to what those other two officers were tasked with, and whatever the discipline looked like for them. Exactly.
Can I ask a follow-up though? Because my understanding is actually that not only was there not discipline applied, but there was actually no investigation into those individuals.
Yeah, there was definitely an investigation, that I know for sure. But I will provide that to the COB in detail with what steps were actually taken with the other two officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to get to public comment as a reminder for folks, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, which was some time ago now. If you can keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, that would be appreciated. And while we Do appreciate everyone using their voice. A question directed at the Director of Safety is most valued if possible. Let's see. I see Sarah Nichols has a hand raised, and if you would like to raise your hand for public comment, please do so, and we will admit you to the panelist portion of the meeting. All right, Sarah, can you hear us?
Yes, good morning.
Great,
I'm
go
Sarah
ahead.
Nichols. I'm from Together, Colorado. And just for the interest of transparency and collaboration, we wanted to share that we met with Chief Thomas on Monday and talked about education-based development. And he committed to us that there would be some kind of community group that would work with his office to review EBD when it's in place on a monthly basis meet, and I would assume that COB and OIM would be part of that. He also shared with us what he said was the latest and greatest version of the policy. I've shared that with some members of the board. I don't have everyone's email address, but feel free to share that around. And also, he shared with us that it's the University of Georgia that is going to be doing the research for to see if EBD is effective. And that was something that he did not want to share on Thursday. We seem to be getting information that the rest of the community is not getting. And that is both uncomfortable to us and also puzzling to us. And so my question for Director Gardner is, are you looped in on all of these things? Have you gotten these specific updates or any other updates about EBD that the rest of the community has not? Thank you.
I might follow that question by saying, Monitor Castle, have you received any of this information in more formal channels? But go ahead, Director Gardner.
I was just going to say, yes, thank you for the question, Sarah. I have not yet caught up with, been able to debrief with Chief Thomas from the meeting he had yesterday. We actually meet later on today. So in terms of from that meeting, not up to speed yet. As you know, last night we had a officer involved shooting, and I saw him last night about 2:30 in the morning, but we didn't get a chance to cover that, but we will cover that today. I will say though, the last discussion that we've had on that, probably the community's not necessarily privy to, is I had a meeting with Liz Castle, the monitor, and a hearing officer, someone who is very intimately involved in discipline and how that works on the other side of it, to get their input about even some more information about it, and just a listening session to figure out what their perspective was on that. And so that's probably the only thing outside of what the chief has been going on and talking with you here at COB and the community. That's probably the only thing that I've been a part of that's probably been separate from that. But right now, there's nothing on the calendar. I don't have anything on the calendar yet for speaking with community, but I look forward to it.
Lost my voice. Will do my best to respond. Because there have been multiple iterations of the draft, the chief and I agreed that we will wait until, because the period for community input is not finished. It was extended, and there's no deadline. So I anticipate that there'll be, there needs to be consideration of that input as well. So that I have asked the chief to send us the final draft, because we were just going back and forth. And then we will make our recommendations on that very final draft. I've also talked with Director Gardner, who has indicated that he will hear from us, and I imagine the COB as well, before any final decision is made, so that we can give our entire presentation and address our concerns.
It's worth mentioning that both the board and the monitor's office are sort of the formal channels for review and discussion on policy. And so the fact that, you know, an important community member, but a sort of non-structural community member in this discussion is sort of getting final drafts before the rest of us is more than strange in my mind. And I'm sorry, Sarah, that puts you in a bit of an odd position. So, you know, continuing on with where we started, right, this very lumpy, disconnected process in order to get what will be the most significant policy change around discipline in the past 10, 15 years. You know, like, this is bizarre in my mind. Go ahead, Sarah, I see you're up.
Yeah, just to clarify, we don't have a final draft. We just have the most recent version. It's got red lines of what has changed and what has not. And I'm happy to share that with anyone on COB and with you, Director Gardner. I just don't have everyone's email address. I sent those versions to Julia and Daniel and Rufina and some other community members. So
we'll make sure everyone gets a copy.
And I just want to be clear, at some point, once we made the agreement, like, we're going to look at the final draft because it was, you know, taking up a lot of our resources and time. I don't know which one was the last one that we looked at. So I can't tell you which one we have.
Yes. Again, part of the whole problem here. Okay, I see Dr. Calderon is in with her hand up. If we can promote her. And Sarah, thank you for your comments and your important engagement on the topic of EBD. Dr. Calderon, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start off by saying thank you to the COB for giving us opportunity to talk directly with Mr. Gardner, because there has not been other opportunities through the city officially. I think there was one community meeting, and I always see those as kind of manufacturing community consent. We should be able to talk directly to our public officials about our concerns. I oppose the nomination, first of all, because there was not community input in your selection. And that is something, and it's not you personally, it's whenever a mayor is appointing a significant, powerful position, and yet there was no community process for the problems that we see with that office, which are many, and I have not heard you address those. The vision for changing that and to really reforming it. So none of that was done. The other reason I oppose the nomination is because your lack of qualifications. And, you know, it's not about you being a civilian. And I hate to hear that. I listened to your presentation at the safety committee meeting. Please don't weaponize, you know, civilian, you know, we want civilian oversight in terms of community. It's what we have fought for in terms of independent oversight. When I talk about qualifications, I talk about the deep knowledge of the history that has led to where we're at today. So for example, in your committee hearing, you gave credit to Michael Hancock for creating the CPCC. He did not. That was under Hickenlooper, and it was folks like me who fought for that committee to be created, and it came out of the Fail the Jail campaign under Hickenlooper. Another reason I oppose your nomination is the lack of women being considered for top positions in this city, and particularly in public safety. We have an all-male leadership team, and what that has brought us is a failure to recognize the particular disparities and discrimination and retaliation that women face all across the safety departments, including in your office, and particularly Black women. There's a special punishment for Black women who speak out about the injustices happening in the safety department. I've heard nothing from you in the hearings or the community meeting or even today that addresses the lack of promotion opportunities for women of color, the particular disparities that women in public safety face, and that's across the board, across all the men in public safety who lack that. You also you seem to give Sheriff Diggins a lot of credit, including for him creating the lactation room. That was not created by Sheriff Diggins. That was created by women deputies who could not pump on their shifts. And so we, as women, pushed Sheriff Diggins to create a committee, which I chaired, so that we could get the lactation room. So it's, you know, those might seem like minor things, but the cumulative impact of not having substantive knowledge about how public safety works in Denver and how it's worked over the past 30 years, I think is a deficit. You all touched upon, so I actually want to go back to Sheriff Diggins. I certainly hope that you will read the survey results from deputies. When I pressed Mayor Johnston to do a survey of all public safety officials, and Diggins' survey results from the people that he lead were so bad, that's when the mayor decided not to release it. So when you're giving so much praise to a sheriff, that tells me you're not doing the watchdog position that we expect you to do, to be fair, objective, and critical around these issues that his own officers are raising constantly. One of them actually sent me a complaint, and this is brief, but he said, you know, he doesn't believe you're going to do anything about this, that there was an inmate who created a fire. It was a small fire, so he tried to hide the evidence in his shirt. And when Diggins showed up on the scene, the inmate started talking to him disrespectfully. But Sheriff Diggins' response was basically that, come say it to my face. And so inmates then said, hey, why do we have a sheriff with a felony? Diggins then increased the punishment to that inmate to show everybody his power. This complaint has been reported. This deputy has not heard back and doesn't believe that you will do anything about it because of your close relationship with Diggins, and that it will not be, you're not coming in with an objective perspective. And then finally, just a couple other things. EBD, I agree with everything that has been said about it, and I'm shocked that Chief Thomas finally, I'm not shocked in the sense of unexpected, but like we finally got him to admit what we've known for these past 7 months, which is we're not going to get a say in how this policy was developed. He finally admitted that. And so I really resent my time being wasted for months just to have a policy that he's going to implement. So my question to you is, why is there not going to be an RFP for the researcher? That why is it being left solely to the police chief after the other researchers he went to were not reflective of our community, were not even reflective racially, we're not from an impacted community? And when I asked him, is this going to be a researcher with Colorado ties, because we have great universities that some of I've gone to, why are we not going local? And he said they have, or we have a local researcher, and he said they have Colorado ties. Then we find out he actually has already picked someone from Georgia. So this administration has a credibility problem, whether it's Flock, whether it's EBD, you name it. And words right now mean so little to me from the public safety leadership and from the mayor's office. So we want to get straight answers. Actions speak louder than words. I agree with Rufina, who said community trust has been broken, has been violated, and it needs to be rebuilt. And got to listen to more than just people who manufacture consent and go to meetings that are of your allies, but you have those critical voices at the table as well. So I know that there was a lot of that, a lot that I said, and really, honestly, you're going to be confirmed despite what our concerns around your qualifications. I want to know how, if at least in this little bit of measure, why are you not, or will you speak to the chief and get a commitment for an RFP and have community be part of designing the research project? Because ultimately we pay the price when officers make mistakes against civilians.
So I think there's value and having local academicians involved as we move further down this road. And like I indicated earlier, there's still some more steps to go. And I think reaching out to some of the folks in the field who are local here and some of the local universities to be involved with that is not a closed door. And I think there is value in that. So I will not shut the door on that. And probably our next discussion, I keep saying that as Karen. I think in our next discussion it'll be more update on that, but I agree that there is value locally because those academicians locally have a really good grasp of not just of history, but of the culture here in Denver. So that's what I can commit to.
All right, just one follow-up. Women, how do you plan to address the disparity of women of color in the safety department getting opportunities and promotions? It's largely men of color, Black men who lead these departments, white women who run it behind the scenes, and a lack of women of color representation, or they just get fired and dragged through the media. So a vision for women in leadership and public safety.
Yeah, I will say this and kind of to what I spoke to earlier around when I look at why people leave organizations and why they stay. And what I mentioned was around the higher you go in a lot of these organizations, the less diverse it is, which is what I mentioned. And part of that, it is that. And I think as we take a look at why people have left, as we take a look, I mentioned testing, and we take a look at all of these sorts of things where we do recruiting. I think all of these are always ways to step back and see how we can improve upon casting that broad net and then creating those opportunities. So that will remain a focus of mine as we go down this line. But I think those are the two things that we start with. We take a look at where we're recruiting. We take a look at how we are shaping the organizations, what these jobs look like, who we're involving when we're taking a look at some of these positions that we filled. And I think all of those are being brought to bear and will be brought to bear as we take a look to field roles as they occur.
Well, with all due respect, I totally disagree. There are many qualified women of color who just don't get the opportunity to then move up that ladder. And it's something that we have been fighting for since former DPD officer Tracy Kazee was there. So we've been fighting for it for women in leadership for quite a long time. Thank you, COB, for giving me the opportunity. And Mr. Gardner, I hope that you have a more comprehensive view of the issues of sexism and patriarchy in our public safety departments and address it accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Calderon, for joining us and for your comments. I don't see any other public comment or hands raised in the participant list. Board members, while we have the director for a few more minutes, are there other questions, Alfredo? And just a note on process, I think we probably don't have enough time to have an executive session. So if it's okay with the board, I think we skip and we just close our time out with the director. And Liz can't talk anyway, so Alfredo, I see your hands up.
You're on mute, Mr. Reyes.
Man, still that mute button gets me every once in a while. I have a series of questions for you, Director Gardner, some of which will, I'm sure, take a little bit more research and response to us. So to start, would you commit with working with the OIM to identify sustainable funding sources for its youth program, the Youth Outreach Program, which primarily consists of their Bridging the Gap Cops and Kids Forum? We see that as an essential program to build trust among youth and police officers, specifically around one of your key priorities around prevention. And that's something that has been on our topics of conversation recently, where I think there's a big opportunity there for us to collaborate.
Did you have some more? I'm sorry, I'm just still writing.
Yep. The second one, and this is one that we'll also be making of Chief Thomas. To what extent has DPD participated in federal programs 1033 and 1122 for the purpose of acquiring military grade equipment? 3, if it has participated, what categories do those acquisitions fall into? Gear, surveillance, vehicles, weapons, etc. And will you commit to providing us with a purchase log by the next time you meet with us as a COB? And then building off of that, regarding end use monitoring, what safeguards exist to ensure this equipment isn't used on civilians and peaceful protesters? And finally, as we continue to unpack conversations around surveillance and intelligence, regarding the use of intelligence gathering, is DPD activity compliant with criminal intelligence systems operating policies under 28 CFR Part 23? So I know, as I mentioned, some of these will require some more research and coming back to, but really appreciate keeping this at the top of your hot list as we continue to engage on these topics.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. There are a couple of members on the team that have captured that on the call. So look forward to getting that information to you. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you could just to start addressing that first one with the OIM and supporting the youth program and outreach, given I think it's really concerning that the outreach position was cut within DOS. And when we talk about prevention, being able to build those bridges and have a robust community engagement process is going to be essential. And I think collaborating with the OIM is a great place to start.
Yeah, I agree. And I think are you particularly talking about the Cops and Kids program?
Yeah, in particular, I think starting there, but also continuing to explore other opportunities to have a more robust shared community engagement process.
Yeah,
To,
go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
just to continue to build off of those priorities, I think having a deeper and broader partnership with OIM around community engagement and rebuilding that trust is a great place to start.
Yep, agreed. That's part of this, and that's exactly what part of the discussion has been up until this point, is how do we strengthen it? And I will repeat what I said the other day in terms of how I view wins and how I view working with people, and that is that sometimes I won't walk away with exactly how I wanted this thing to work out. But to me, a win is how do we get to a place that we can understand that we can agree equally that is important, something to focus on. So yeah, that will remain that way. In terms of, Cops and Kids in particular, I need to take a look at that funding structure to be able to give you some really accurate information about how we can approach it. I will tell you that there are a lot of discussions right now that we're having internally at DOS about how to continue to cast a wider net and utilize our community at a time where we cannot bear that burden ourselves and strengthen it. So I see it. Yeah, it's a time that's rough, but I think it's also a lot of opportunity in it if we use the time right. And I'm choosing to see the cup half full in terms of trying to get a start and saying, how do we reboot these relationships and how do we identify and work with those folks in the community that have the resources, whether that be the human resource or otherwise, that come along us and help us accomplish these tasks, which is why prevention is at the top. And if I had greater time, I have greater detail, and a lot of these plans are written out in a lot more detail, and be happy to share those with you so that it can provide you a better idea of how I intend to execute those as well.
Okay, additional questions? Alfredo, follow-up?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Director Gardner, and just emphasize the need for funding to come from DOS and public safety, because when you then put the onus of responsibility back on nonprofit leaders who are already strapped for fundraising and finding resources, you're just punting the responsibility outward when, as Chair Richmond mentioned earlier, there is money within public safety. It's just a matter of prioritizing where it goes.
Thank you.
One might say a key theme of this meeting is that the department isn't doing community engagement particularly well at this time. And so cutting positions, could have some interesting consequences considering how bumpy it's been this past year. Are there other board members wishing to ask questions? Okay, seeing none, Director Gardner, look forward to continuing to work with you on all of these topics. Appreciate you staying quite long and recommend in the future to just keep your calendar booked for the full 2 hours of our meeting. So I appreciate your graciousness in that. Thank you, board and community members, for your engagement today. And with that, I will wrap our meeting up.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.